Do you ever feel like your emotions are in overdrive, but you don't know why? Or maybe you do, but you just don't really know what to do with them? Today, we're going to dive really deep into what high emotions really mean, how they create both internal and external conflicts, and some tools that will help you navigate them. You'll be so glad you hit play because this conversation I'm having with the incredible Chrissy Nichols just might change the way you handle these big feelings. Welcome to Educate and Rejuvenate, the podcast when emotions run high. Welcome to Educate and Rejuvenate, the podcast to help you revitalize your teaching, renew your spirit, and reignite your passion for life. I'm your host, Kelsey Sorensen, a former teacher, current homeschool mom, published author, and certified life coach. Whether you are a teacher in a traditional classroom, homeschool from your kitchen table, or anywhere in between, I am on a mission to help you not only survive as an educator, but thrive. Get ready to uplevel your skills with incredible insights from guest experts and discover the missing piece, rejuvenating yourself. Are you ready to both educate and rejuvenate? Let's go. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you hit play on today's episode. It is a much needed conversation. I'm checking in on you, especially if you're listening shortly after this airs. We are airing this episode on Election Day 2024 in the United States, which if it's the present time, you know this is a big deal. If you're listening later, maybe you remember that it was a pretty big deal. But this episode is also going to be very general too. So whenever emotions are high about anything, and we got down the path of emotions being high, especially during times of conflict, like in relationships, whether it be with your admin, like a heated conversation, or a co-teacher, or a family member, or a friend, or really anybody. Today we're talking about it really generally. We want this to be an episode you can come back to whenever those emotions run high. Now, I do want to mention, because last week on the podcast, I said that today we would have an interview with Giselle from Yoga Kids Story. So excited to have her on. I've not forgotten about that. That episode is airing next week. But as soon as I saw that we were airing an episode on Election Day, I was like, let's do something about emotions. Let's do something about what people are really going to be feeling that week, but also keep it relevant long term. And leave it open to everybody, right? This isn't about personal opinions or beliefs. It's about no matter what, you're probably feeling some big emotions anytime, right? Whether it's about this, whether it's about, a teaching situation 2 years from now when you're listening to this, we want to make sure that this will continue to be an episode you can come back to. But before we dive in, I need to introduce my incredible guest, Chrissy Nichols. I'm not going to do a formal intro because so many of you know her, because this is probably her 4th or 5th time on the podcast. She's also been in all the coaching panels we've done. And those of you who are in the Educate and Rejuvenate Club, you know that she is one of our coaches there. She's incredible. We just love Chrissy. She is an executive function coach, and she went to the life coach school just like me. We've really developed this wonderful working relationship, but she does mention some conflicts we've had that I kind of forgot about as we got into this conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, they can help you grow a relationship too. So super interesting. We're going to get into that. Really excited to have Chrissy on today. And let me know if you enjoyed this conversation. I have wondered about maybe pulling in some of the coaches more often when we talk about coaching topics. Also having some more guests on the show while still doing my solo episodes for you too. I love doing both, but sometimes it's really fun when we can dive into a conversation. So before we roll that clip, I want to share just one more thing with all of you. If you love this episode, if you love the topic of emotions, what to do when they run high, how to handle your emotions, if you want more support, like way more support with honoring your emotions, holding boundaries, navigating conflict, creating the teacher life that you desire inside and outside the classroom, or your homeschooling life, or, teaching online life, whatever it looks like for you, you're going to want to grab a copy of my new book, Educate and Rejuvenate. Same name as the podcast, our events, our website, everything these days. Educate and Rejuvenate, the book. And this is a book that I poured my heart and soul into, and really giving you all the tools in one playbook. So you're going to get some ideas and suggestions in this interview today. But if you really just want a guidebook that is going to help you to find exactly what you need to do, because there are so many tools, but it's customized to you because you're going to get a deeper understanding of yourself. And it really takes everything I talk about on this podcast or during our Educate and Rejuvenate live events, all the research I've done and compiled that is going to help you to be able to feel less burned out at school, to feel like you have more time because you know how to manage it, to know what to do when these overwhelming emotions come up. This book is going to be your guidebook. And we have had reviews just flowing in about how helpful this book has been for teachers already. And it's only been out like not even 2 months yet. So we are so thrilled at the reception so far, but it is just getting started. We really want to get this book into the hands of as many teachers as possible because it is such an accessible way to get this work into the hands of so many teachers. It's less than 1 month of being in the Educate and Rejuvenate Club where you get to work with me. You will get basically all the tools. Like I even have people who've been in the club for a year and they're like, I learned so much from this book. It's now clicking. Everything we talked about in the club, it makes so much more sense. So really it's a way for you to jumpstart. Just get a copy of the book and it's going to help you so much. And when you grab a copy of the book, again, now's the time to do it because you'll get to join us in our book club. You'll get to work with me. And there's basically a full course that comes with it because there is a workbook that walks you through all the exercises that I mentioned in the book. And then I took videos going through each one. So no matter how you like to learn, if you were like, maybe even if you don't read the book, but you do the workbook and you watch all the videos that I put together only for book buyers inside the app, it's going to help you. So again, if you have not yet, go to Amazon or Target or Barnes & Noble online and snag your copy of Educate and Rejuvenate so you can join the book club. It's not too late. We've got so many great bonuses when you purchase a copy of the book with that PDF workbook, with the app, all the videos, the personalized support with me if you buy it before the end of 2024 when you can join the book club. It's going to be such a great time, this book club. We're having a good time, but it's not too late to join. And if you do have the book, if you're reading it and loving it, and maybe you finished it, maybe you're just still diving in, but if you're enjoying the book, here's your reminder. Well, one, to read it also. If you have the book and you're like, oh, wait, I haven't started it yet, or oh, I forgot to keep reading it. Here's your reminder to pick it up and use it. That's why you have it, right? But also, if you're loving it or have finished it, I'd love for you to leave a review on Amazon. And here's why. It's going to help us get the book, again, into the hands of more teachers so we can flip that statistic, the one that's on the back of the book that says 44% of teachers say they're always or almost always burned out. And even the one that we did in our own studies after I had already finished the book, that it was 76 say they always put their job above themselves. Like, we want to flip that statistic. We want more of you to feel less burned out and have the tools and strategies to be able to do that. And this book is the best way to do that. So if you can please leave a review if you're loving the book, it helps more teachers to know that it's a book that they would enjoy. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's dive into today's interview where we are talking about when emotions run high. All right, Chrissy, my friend, I'm so excited to have you back. We are overdue
We
to be doing this episode.
are overdue. That is my thought, and that is backed. So it's so great to be back on the podcast. It's been way too long, and it kind of really makes me think of our OG roots. Remember?
I know. I don't even think you've been here since it was Wife Teacher Mommy, the podcast. Like,
Let's
have you?
not
Like,
know, but I've been loving
I
it.
don't think
I've
you
been
have.
hearing it.
Yeah.
I've been into it. Educate and
Oh,
rejuvenate
I
is
mean,
my
you've been here.
jam.
You've you've been at our events and with our members each month, but you
Yeah.
haven't been on the podcast. So
No,
we're missing that
but
now.
I feel like energetically I'm always here because I
Oh,
always love
definitely.
our listeners. I always love our educators. And I always love the topics that you get into. And by the way, my thought about us is we are going to rock today's topic. There's going to be so much value
Oh,
for
yeah.
everyone in their headspace and heart space to listen to. So if you're driving out there, you're going to want to take notes, but don't do 8 things at once, everybody. Just listen back.
Yeah, you can come back to this episode whenever you want, whenever emotions are running high, because that is what we were talking about today. And funny thing is, I actually had a different episode planned for today, right? I have an interview I'm doing tomorrow with Giselle from Kids Yoga Stories. So excited for that to come out. But I
Cool.
realized the day that this episode was hitting the podcast is election day in the US. And that's not our topic for today. We're not talking about, because I want this to be like an episode you can listen to anytime.
Yes.
But I was like, oh, we need something for all the emotions that everybody's going to be
Mhm.
feeling. Not, and then it's something that you can continue coming back to as well when you're like, oh, my emotions are high. What do? I need a pep talk. What do I do here? I'm feeling a little crazy right now. And then I thought, So it was like when emotions run high, that's the title of the episode. And I was like getting ready to outline it. And I'm like, no, I want this to be a candid conversation with someone. Who would that be? And then you were obviously the first person to come to my mind.
Hmm.
So I texted Chrissy
Thank you.
and here we are.
Well, it's always, no matter what we're getting into in the educator space, the human space, the emotion field
Mhm.
space, it's always such an honor to be here. And it's always so good to talk about how our thoughts, I really, on the regular, I'll run out of my coaching office and I'll grab my husband or something and I'll say, honey, it really is our thoughts, and because it constantly every day I am shown, oh, if I can just think about something in a different way or have a different perspective. The beautiful amazingness of today's incredible topic is that sometimes our thoughts and our feelings happen almost instantaneously. And it's not
Mm.
even a snap of the fingers. I was thinking about the Olympics when one person,
Like a millisnap,
yeah,
like of the
yeah, when
fingers.
somebody comes in like a hundredth of a second faster than somebody else. Sometimes I feel like when emotions are high and we're really in, it could be a societal state as our nation, the presidential election is here, but it could
Mhm.
be a conflict. It could be a big conversation with a friend, and you catch yourself in that moment when emotions are running really high. It could be a conversation you're having with yourself, but I think this is incredibly valuable, that today's topic, when we're thinking about when things do get a little bit heated, when things do get a little bit hot, especially in relationships. This happens at school on the daily, but
Oh, yeah.
definitely with the holidays coming up, this is a good one to think about when we're at the holiday table and we're talking with members of our family or friend group.
Absolutely.
And big stuff can come up, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we're both, you can't see on the podcast listeners, but we're both,
Oh, they can. They can if they're watching on the Educate
ah,
Rejuvenate app.
I love it. Well, I hope
I
you're
forgot to
watching.
mention that to you. Hopefully, you're okay with
Oh
us
my
being on
gosh,
camera.
love it so much. I wore my super special earrings today. So everyone in the
They're super cute.
everyone in
You
the
should all be in the app watching the
everybody in
video.
the community knows I love my super special big chunky earrings and jewelry. But yeah, tell me, Kels, when, let's just get into this. When was the last time this kind of happened for you?
Oh, for me.
Yeah, I know. I never let you go. I'm always going to ask you. Let's talk
Let's
about
see what's
you.
appropriate to share on the podcast.
Everything. We have sophisticated listeners. They can handle it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I definitely have several incidents of that. I'm gonna just put this a little more vaguely just so it's,
Sure.
I want this to be friendly for everybody.
Yeah.
It was a post on social media
Mhm.
about just some things in the world, right? And it was one that really made my emotions run really high because I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh my goodness, I do not agree with that."
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
And then it made me have some thoughts about that person that I like was like, "Oh, is that really how I wanna think about somebody else?" But then it was causing me to feel
Mhm.
anxiety, like anxious and frustrated and angry and these feelings that really were causing separation from this other person rather than me wanting to be like, "Oh, let's try to understand them more. Let's try to understand where they're coming from." Like
Mhm.
we're all people. We all I think deep down we all have the same goals in life. We all want to love everybody. We all want to help everybody in the world and we just have different ideas of how to do that. So, I wasn't tapped in with that core like self where I was like, "Oh, I really do believe we are all good people." And
Mhm.
you know? Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
100%. And do you mind if I ask you another question about this situation? Because
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think you brought up, so social media is a conversation. Social
Yeah.
media is a relationship because
It's social, right? That's why they call it social media. Yeah.
indeed, indeed. And what I think, what we're really feeling into here is your very human reaction of right away
Mhm.
going, I can't believe that person just said that. I thought they were a friend. Or I'm putting words in your thought space, right? But you feeling a bit separate or you feeling a little
Mhm.
bit distant. And that's a very real, quick human emotion that our brains give us. And
Yeah.
we're going to talk about tools in a second, but let's just spend a minute in that spot, which I think is very normal of maybe shock, maybe the temperature goes up. Again, we just talked about some body sensory vibrations we have, some sensations like
Mhm.
pulse goes up, heart starts to beat faster, sweaty palms. Maybe you get something in your throat. I do when my emotions go up. And the one thing I always
Yeah.
tell my clients is that when our emotions are high, our intelligence is low.
Mhm.
And you just name that, like you're reading a social media post or you're looking at something and you have that whatever micro reaction of stress is coming up for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do next before even getting into any tools, tricks, tips, solutions for our listeners? But what's your headspace in that moment?
The funny thing is I've had multiple of these moments about
Yeah,
different things, right? I'm sure we all
of
have where it's like,
course.
oh, you see something on social media. And I feel like this is a good example because sometimes we feel safe behind a screen or whatever, but really it is, like you said, it's social. It is other people.
Mhm.
And so anyway, what I do next, I mean, the funny thing, it really depends. Sometimes I'm in it for a while.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm like frustrated. I'm ruminating on my own thoughts or opinions about whatever it is.
Mhm.
I might put a response there that I'm like, oh, maybe that wouldn't be a response that I would put if I were tapped into my true self, right? If I were tapped into my higher level brain, into my actual deeper thoughts and beliefs on top of these automatic thoughts that are just trying to protect myself, trying to protect how I think or how I feel, and trying to almost prove that I'm right
Mhm.
when that's not
Mhm.
what it's about, right? About us being right all the time. So sometimes there'll be a response. Other times I do catch myself because I am doing this work and I'm like, hey, that interesting, right? I feel my pulse racing. I feel myself getting angry. What's going on in my head right now? What's going on in my body right now? What's going on in my heart right now?
Mhm.
How could I try to understand this other person's perspective a little bit more?
Okay.
Connect with them as another human being.
So you're amazing and very elevated, and we're both coaches in this mindfulness space, but can I get real petty with you and tell you what my brain does?
Oh yeah, get real petty.
When I mean, even this is our amazing vocation and profession, and you and I have been trained by, I think, one of the best coaching schools in the world. I think it is the only coaching school. But I still find myself, even in this work, if I'm in a situation, it's either a social media post, exactly this example, or it could be a live conversation, could be at a dinner table or at a dinner
Oh
party.
yeah, especially like you were talking about like at dinner parties and the holidays, which we're coming up on.
Yeah. If something is said that really takes me aback and really puts me on my heels, my brain goes to full judgment. And I listen to what it has to say, but it says things like, I can't believe she said that. She's so dumb.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Yeah.
that came out of her mouth. I thought we were friends. I thought I was friends with a smarter person than this. She is not
Yeah.
the woman I thought she was. She, he, whomever it is who said it. Wow,
Yeah.
I really thought I knew them better. Wow, I really thought we were on the same page about things. And I hear it. And the reason I know that it does this and gets full petty, full nasty, full judgment is because I've been through these cycles so many times. And in the past,
Mhm.
I feel like in the spectrum of being able to know what to do in these, this is why this is such a good conversation because I need this work. I used to
Oh, I do too.
I used to be at like a full 10 out of 10 reactive mode where I would not quite climb over the table or into the social media screen, but I almost would. Now I'm at least listening to my thoughts, but I just want to really come out to all of our amazing students and listeners and teachers out there and just say, wow, I still get real judgy, petty, and awful, even in the
Yeah. Oh,
moment.
I do too.
And I
I do
and
too.
I
Yeah.
I
Like I was saying, sometimes I don't even switch in
yeah,
the mode. Other times I'm like, "Hey, I notice you doing that." But there are
yeah.
times where I like ruminate in it or I write a response. There was even one the other day. It was in a homeschool Facebook group, and there was a post that I did not agree with, and a lot of people were agreeing with it. And then I felt like I don't agree, and I was like, maybe this isn't the group for me anymore. I was snarky, you know. And then people
Mhm.
were like, there are thousands of people in this group, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, now I'm like embarrassed because this is my business. If someone like clicks to my profile, and I'm representing my company totally
Right.
in reaction mode, but we all do this. So I do think it's good for us to share that, oh, I'm not just the expert up on a pedestal. I'm always perfect with how I react to these situations because we're not.
No, and I think that's really important for everyone to hear. We're still human beings, having a human experience on this planet, and there is so much. Let's get real. I mean, I guess we could say there's always so much. That might be my thought, but right now, in this beautiful moment of our time, even if we look at the weather, we just had the
Mhm.
southeast experienced some big weather
Yeah.
upheavals. We don't even have to look at government or politics or society to know that there's a lot all the time. And when we're in
Yeah.
these moments where either someone's coming at us, it could happen at school. I think for me, my growth has been to allow that part of myself. Kelsey, I love parts work, but allow that
Oh,
in
I love heart work.
allow that internal part that is full petty, full judgmental, full just gonna say all her stuff. I let her do it internally. If I'm at that dinner party, I do try to like fix my face. I'm not trying to be fake. I'm just trying to take an
Right.
internal pause because the Chrissy
Yeah.
of old would have really stepped into that arena when I wasn't ready. And like you said, Kels,
Yeah.
the next piece of this for me is, I know a lot of us listening to this podcast are like, whoa, okay, ladies, but then what do you do about it? And yeah, I want to get to that in a minute, but I think it is so
Yeah.
important for everyone to hear that you don't have to manage your mind like right away in that moment because sometimes it's impossible.
Mhm.
Emotions are high, intelligence is low. And we know about our feelings, they are filled with wisdom. They are momentary. They come in, we process them, we hope, and then they flow out. They come with their gifts and their incredible wisdom. But sometimes that pettiness and that judgment for what I just read on social media lasts for days. And
Yeah.
I just have to be with it.
Oh, can I share another social media one that's like completely I feel like everybody
Yes.
would honestly, almost everybody is on my side when I share this story, but you can still see kind of how the emotion really played into it. So, I shared a reel back in August of my daughter. It was a throwback reel. And because so it was one that was like a year or 2 ago, I'm not sure. It was like, "Happy birthday, wanted to reshare this reel." It's like a really cute one of her, like, she's doing one of our Educate Rejuvenate worksheets, and she is fixing sentences, and the sentence was like, "I wanna eat pizza," and I asked her what's wrong with the sentence, and she says that what was wrong wasn't the missing period, but it was that he did not say please, which was adorable. And most people take it for that, right? But then somebody commented and they're like, "How about you teach her to not use a baby voice?" And so when
Mm.
I saw that comment, a mama bear came out, right? I was feeling, and this is just a comment on the internet, like 5 words or whatever, like, "How about you teach her not to use baby voice?" Okay, 10 words, right? These
Mhm.
10 words, I don't even think they put a question mark. I think it was just like 10 words on the screen, right? That could be a circumstance if we're looking at the model. And yet, I am suddenly filled with this rage of like, for one, them talking about my daughter, but also questioning my parenting and my abilities and like that I don't know what I'm doing. And it was kind of rage covering this almost like, shame a little bit because it's like, oh, well, am I not doing enough? When really I know I am. I've done a lot for her. And also, all kids just grow up on their own
Mhm.
timeline. And it was a while ago, too. So, anyway, putting all that aside,
Mhm.
I felt all these strong emotions, and immediately I typed up a comment, but then I edited it like a million times and stuff. The one I finally posted, I felt like was okay. And then an hour later, I did a thing in my Instagram stories where I shared actually how I processed and moved through the emotions. I was like, hey, I got this comment. What do you all think of it? Do you think it was called for? And I had a poll, and almost everybody said it was uncalled for. And then I shared, yeah, but guess what? So many emotions came up, and I shared about what I did and how I moved through it. And then it was a few weeks later, I actually did a response reel to it where I shared, like, here's actually the research behind the baby voice thing. And that's because I was in a much more regulated place. I did it as a reel, not a story, because at that point I felt like I could process through the emotion. I'm like, I can speak authoritatively now and not in reaction mode. Be like, hey, thank you for your comment. But actually, here is the research that shows that just telling a kid that they're using a baby voice doesn't work. And it actually makes them do it more because it gives them attention for it. Right. So I did a reel about that. Anyway, that was an example of just really moving through it and the response able to change once you were able to really move through that emotion.
I think that is such a powerful example. And by the way, I love that you did a reel about the processing of the emotion of that. And I think I remember
Yeah.
when I saw it come through and I was like, that is so vulnerable and that is so needed because
Yeah.
this happens to all of us when we get flooded
Mhm.
and dysregulated. And I think what we're both feeling into this very first part of when emotions are high is just let them be high
Yeah.
or let them be
Let them,
low. Just let them, right? Which is a great,
but don't try to push them away,
right.
right? Because when, yeah, let them be.
Yes.
Let them breathe.
Yes. So that I think the genius of what you said, right? Because the person who came back and talked about the baby voice, for me, what that fires off in me as, a mother, it would be something like any would-be mother out there, like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, right? I must be
Yeah.
doing
Yeah, the
something
shame.
wrong. It must be wrong
Mhm.
for a child to use this voice or this intonation. Who says? And in other cultures,
Yeah.
it's perfect and whatever it is. But if we don't have the bandwidth to sift through, like you said, I was able to sift through and process and figure it out. But in
Mhm.
that moment, gosh, everybody, just please give yourself a break. You are a human being and not always in this space to be so regulated all the time. I saw this really beautiful quote that said, I used to really revere monks and Buddhists who would come out with all of this wisdom until I realized that a lot of them lived alone with no family, no children, and were
Yeah, right?
right? And weren't partnered. And it's like, oh, yeah,
Well, that would be easy,
right.
like, that would be
Exactly.
right?
So for me, I mean, and I have to do this with my own life. If I'm flooded, triggered, just anything is getting inside of me, I have to sit with it for a good long time. And I think the longer I've been doing this, the longer I kind of have to sit with it. And then, just as you were
Mhm.
saying, in those beautiful weeks' time, coming back, and coming back. But the let it is not about pushing it aside, the emotion, or asking it to go away. It's just allowing it to be, allowing it to almost follow you throughout your day, perched on your shoulder, just right there, so that you can come back with strategies. And I don't know, Kels, what would you say? What was one thing that helped you come back? Do you remember in that moment with the baby voice example for your daughter?
Oh,
What allowed you to
let
come
me
back and feel a little bit more neutrality or regulation?
I did a lot of what we talk about with processing our emotions initially, right? Because they did have the space to do that. I wasn't at a school or something. It was in the evening when I saw the comment. And I think right then I wasn't able to immediately do it. So kind of breathed and took some deep breaths and everything, got my kids ready for bed. And then and so then it was an hour later when I was like kind of processing through doing the whole, like, body scan, doing the whole, like, all the things and moving through it, and then I did this story to talk through it and connect because that helps me regulate. That's one of the things that can help you regulate your nervous system too, is be able to express yourself, being able to connect with other people. So, I did that. I let the Educate and Rejuvenate community in because they knew, I'm like, "Okay, that reel had gone kind of viral. That person who commented was really not a member of our community. There's some random person who's just being negative." And so you can reach out for support, and that helps you moving through emotions once you've done that initial processing, especially. And even then I still felt it. I just kind of carried it with me a little bit
Mhm.
and would notice it every now and then. Honestly, for a few days, it was there, even though it was just like a comment on Instagram. The feelings were strong, so they didn't just go away right away. And that's why I didn't do that reel actually talking about, like, oh, and with baby voice, here's the actual research, or here's why I'm doing fine. I didn't try to do that while I was still in the processing of the emotion, or it would have come out like really angry or whatever, because it kind of was.
Mhm.
I allowed myself to move through that anger before I approached it again, which I feel can be sometimes helpful in other situations too. Like if you have a conflict with your admin or with a coworker, to move through those emotions before having the discussion, or in your marriage, whenever it's anything heated, it can be very helpful to take a little bit of time, even just like, hey, let's pause this conversation and
Mhm.
come back and we can both like process through our emotions, you know?
I love what you just said there, and what you did is that having that privacy to process, because
Mhm.
I think it's really hard to, as educators, often in front of little bodies, in front of a class, or even if we're in a room with admin, this can come up, right? And I think it's really important to be able to talk to your emotions and say, I feel you internally. Of course, this is all
Yeah.
silent, but what I do is, and our members know this, I talk to all my parts, I talk to everybody, and I say, you can have your say inside of my body. You can do whatever you need to do right now in this moment. I am not in a space where I'm able to fully weep. I'm not in a space where I'm able to fully
Mhm.
scream. I'm not in a space where that would be an appropriate professional response. I don't want to freak out my kids. That would not be in service to my
Yeah.
students. So I talk to my emotions and say, I'm going to come back to you tonight. You're really important to me. Or Saturday
Mhm.
is when I have my next privacy to process moment. I'm going to come back and feel you then.
Yeah.
And then, just as you explained, go through, where is this in my body? What's it doing? Does it have a texture and a color? Is it moving? Is it static?
Yeah.
I really try to describe it and write down the story of the emotion. I liked what you said about
Mhm.
knowing the story, and then am able to process it. But I guess one thing that could be helpful, and I don't always remember to do it, but this idea of neutralizing to normalize, or normalizing and neutralizing emotion in a
Yeah.
conflict space, it just helps me to have one anchor thought when I'm in this rage space. That's just a human having a human idea or a human thought. That person
Mhm.
giving me their viewpoint about whatever it is in the world is a human with an opinion.
Yeah.
That's all.
And even, like, to them, it was just some random person on the internet. Like, they weren't seeing, "Oh, this is a real mother and daughter really thinking through it." They're just like, "Oh, why don't you do this?" And then they probably moved on with their day, probably in a cranky mood or something, you
Right.
know? But so just normalizing and neutralizing it a little bit. Oh, like, they were just making a comment on a social media post. They weren't thinking like, "Oh, let's ruin this mom's day," you know? That's not what they were thinking.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
or a principal that comes in for an observation and says something very cutting to a teacher who's
Yeah.
just doing the very best that she can or he can or in that moment. And I don't think the
Mhm.
principal woke up and said, "You know what? I'm going to crush my educator spirit today." No.
Yeah.
I think it's also really important for us to remember of ourselves first, and then we can give this to grace to other people. Like, she's just doing the best she can. I'm doing the best I can. He's doing the best he
Mhm.
can. That
Yep.
troll on the internet who's going to be incredibly hurtful. Wow. It might come off in a really weird way, but they're doing the best they can, right?
Yeah.
Until they know better to do better. I love that quote
Yep.
by Maya Angelou, right? Until we know better, it's hard to do better. But once we know better, we can do better. Everybody listening to this is like, yeah, I want to know how to calm myself in the moment. I want to know how to not lose my shiz and keep
Mhm.
it together, even if I'm in a really heated or conflictual space. And
Yeah.
I love, Kelsey, what you said. I think, first of all, just letting the emotion be there, and then just really giving yourself a lot of grace and privacy to feel it. That processing and
Yeah.
privacy is huge. And then you get to decide once you're more regulated, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this can happen so often in schools, like you said, with admins, with co-teachers, with parents, or for our homeschool friends who are listening, it can be with people in the community as well. So you just never know when it's going to come up. And so when it does, like it often surprises you,
Yeah.
right? And it catches you off guard. Like I wasn't expecting to see that comment for one or
Yeah.
the different social media posts. They just showed up. And then it's like, oh, now we're dealing with this right now. And now these thoughts automatically came up and these feelings came up. And so we need to give ourselves some grace because sometimes maybe we didn't have the time to fully process it and maybe we reacted in a way we didn't want to. And then we can reflect on it and be like, okay, now I need to process that. I love what you mentioned too about how you would ask yourself those questions about the feelings, which I love doing too, but we hadn't talked about it yet today. But you even mentioned writing it down, which I love.
Mhm.
I do find that when you write things down,
Mhm.
like, I get more because sometimes I wanna skip that step. I wanna be like, "Oh, I don't wanna write it down right now. I'm thinking about it. I know what's going on." But then really when you grab a pen and paper and you start writing,
Mhm.
even more comes up. It's so
You
powerful.
know, you bring up such a good point, which I don't know if you ever think about these situations that you're about to go into, but writing it down also helps you really practice. With a lot of my clients
Mhm.
in the executive function space, which in our community, I think folks know that I still love my teachers so much, but I also really love helping anyone get anything done. My jam now is anybody who needs to get their stuff done. I work with the executive part of their brains, right? So that's time management and working memory prioritization. But with some of my clients, we come up with a feelings plan, or we just even write out
I love that.
before we go into a situation, sometimes with other humans, because I mean, some of my clients anxiety and social anxiety, let's be real, even I have it.
Yeah.
But when we practice what might come up, even when I'm able to write down for myself, oh, there might be someone who has a different political viewpoint than I do. There might be someone who
Mhm.
has a different notion about what's okay to say at a table, what's not, what's okay to say about motherhood,
Yeah.
like with your baby talk
Yeah.
example. And if I can practice ahead of time, I think it really helps me, and it really
Yeah.
helps me be aware of what's coming. So it's almost like a practice plan for conflict. And I will tell you, everybody, when I help my clients move through this, or when I do it with myself, I always practice on myself first, everything that I put together.
Mhm.
It helps so much just to even say, okay, you're about to walk into a space where other humans are going to have other thoughts, feelings about a particular
Yeah.
thing that are going to be different from yours. It's so giving and I think thoughtful to somebody else. So that's one of the reasons I do it. I do it for me, but I am also like, okay, if I can just have a plan and know that this is going to come up, it's going to be a lot less scary. It's not going to
Yeah.
knock me off my center.
Yeah, and I love that you can do that without even knowing it can just be like, "Oh, this is when conflict with another person comes up." When, like I mentioned, it comes up completely unexpectedly, you're kind of like, "Oh, yeah, this is a conflict with a person. I might not have had this exact conflict before
Right.
with this exact person, but I know what I do when there's conflict. I kind of have a go-to."
Yeah.
Or it may be about a particular concept too, but maybe you also do it for just, "This is what I'm going to do
Yeah.
when a conflict comes up."
Yeah. And it might be as simple as when conflict arises, I'm just going to do some box breathing. I'm going to breathe
Yeah.
in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5. And that's,
Before I say a single word.
yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I'm gonna really work on my listening. I'm gonna answer with a question, something like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about this?" Even going in
yeah.
with a plan for myself, like, "This is how I'm gonna be," it's so
Yeah.
helpful. And I think the other thing that you just said, which is so brilliant about conflict, is, like, so often we think that conflict is a bad thing. But I want everybody listening to this to think back to a time when you did have conflict with someone and you were eventually able to work it out. Didn't you feel closer to that person?
Yeah.
It's
Well, I feel like sometimes if we try to avoid conflict, if we're just like, we're just going to tiptoe around this, or I just don't want to talk to that person or whatever, like we're avoiding actually coming, and obviously it depends on the relationship. Like maybe somebody you're not as close to where you're like, I don't need to talk about this with that person. That might be smart. Don't do that. But other times if it's a closer other times Chrissy, we're having too much fun here. Sorry, everybody. But if it's a closer relationship, say like your marriage or a good friend or your co-teacher who you're like teaching with every day, or your admin who you want to have a good working relationship with. Like
Mhm.
working through that conflict and being able to get to the other side of it, and it can help you to understand each other more than you did before. It can help you to open up your mind to more than just there's this option or that option. Oh, there's this third option, this fifth option, this 10th option. Like, wow, so many other options, right? Of ways of thinking about this or ways of us like working through this together.
Yeah.
So really, we're kind of it's an opportunity, right? And it's a way for us to learn and to grow. Just like Gabby Bernstein says, an obstacle can be a detour in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. And I see conflict as a way to really deepen, as you were saying, with the people I want to deepen with. And the reason I was
Yeah.
laughing so hard is because we can always give ourselves the option like, do I want to really talk to this person about this thing? Heck no, hard no, not doing it. And that's a boundary.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about
Yeah.
boundaries, but we're talking about those long term, beautiful friendships. Maybe with a co-teacher, you're going to be together all year. So this is an opportunity to deepen and to be able to say with vulnerability, like, hey, I misunderstood you or I was wrong. That I have okay, listeners, believe it or not, Kelsey and I have had uncomfortable conversations. I can barely
We have.
I'm trying to go back to think back like, even in the
Like, what were
beginning,
they? Like,
well,
what we have.
I mean, I'm even gonna say very vulnerably, like when we were just figuring out our working relationship, and I was like,
Yeah.
I would say something like, "Well, I'm thinking about working this way," and you're like, "No, I didn't think about that." And I'm like, "Oh, ew, okay. What do I say right now?" Or, but guess what?
Yeah.
Every time Kelsey and I've been able to come back and say, "Oh, I thought it was because of this," or "I thought this," or "I was having this own thought, and this is my stuff." We deepen. And I'm sure throughout the years, we're going to deepen even more because there's going to be more because
Yep.
this is part of the human experience. And if you can really lean into it and get good at it, there's no room that's closed to you because you know you can handle it. You can walk into any space and be like, you know what? An emotion like humiliation, like this is your practice, this is your lesson plan for the conflict feels. An emotion like
Yeah.
anger or humiliation or rejection or I'm doing it wrong as a mom is going to come up. Okay, I know that I can just feel that vibration in my body. It's not going to kill me. And I might even
Mm.
deepen with this person, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, Kelsey and I don't see you nearly enough, babe. But and I love when
I
we do,
know.
but it's not like, we're besties over here. We're both amazing entrepreneur, in demand, hot demand women doing our own thing.
Mhm.
So of course,
I
invariably,
love your wording
no,
there.
it's true. Invariably, I'm gonna say something and Kelsey's gonna be like, I didn't see it that way. And I'm gonna be like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Tell me. I want to hear everything. I think that's important. I love that we just brought that up for us. It's beautiful.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you for this. This is a
It
really good
is.
topic.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's just recap everybody. So when our emotions run high, we tapped on a bunch of stuff here, got a little wild in this recording. We always have fun. But when your emotions run high, Chrissy, how would you recap this?
Yeah, I'm going to recap it. Okay. First of all, just remember when you're in conflict and you're in relationship with somebody else, you could be in a professional space, in a dinner party space, in a political space, whatever happens, family space, holiday space. Just remember, I love this saying, when emotions run high, intelligence is low. So, is this the
Mm.
moment to be very articulate and to go through your point and prove you're right? I'm going to say probably not. So, the recap is when you're feeling those body sensations, just let them. Let all your emotions and your parts be with you for as long as they need to. the space of that conversation, the space of that hour, the space of the 3 days after. Maybe it's 3 weeks. It's okay.
Mhm.
Once you feel as if you are more regulated and can come from a regulated space, and you've processed that emotion so that you know in privacy or however you do it, you might do it with a spouse or a partner or best friend, sister,
Mhm.
coach. But once you feel like you've processed it through, take the wisdom from that and maybe write the story of sifting through those emotions and then come up with a plan if you need a plan for how to respond and or just be able to respond with yourself. But just know that that conflict, what we call conflict, could just be a conversation. It could just be, hey, I see it this way. This is what happened. But I think really that permission space and allowing yourself to be in it, even when emotions are high, is really important because it honors yourself. What did I
Yeah, and it
miss, buddy? Teach me.
Oh, I feel like you did wonderful. What I loved about that too, where you're talking about honoring yourself, but we can honor ourselves and also honor the other person too.
Mhm.
And like you said, when we come about it and we realize that, oh, this is a conversation, just normalizing it a little bit. This is a conversation between two people about a subject, and we're going to get through it, right?
Yeah, and you can even name it for that person. I always love if I have
Yeah.
big feelings or what we would call conflict. Isn't it interesting? We just said conversation and conflict. They both start with CON, which is a
Mhm.
connective and a really
Yeah.
beautiful communicative prefix. You know, the con, the together, connecting, being
Mhm.
with. I like to name that for the other person. I like to say, hey, I really want to sit down and talk to you about blank. Before we do, I want you to know that I love you. No matter what words are
Yeah.
spoken today out of our mouth holes in English, I love you. I love you. I love you. And nothing's going to change that. So
Yeah.
I think when you name the intention, and like you just did right there, that was beautiful. Hey, we're just going to talk about a thing, and you're going to say what's on your heart, and I'm going to say what's on my heart, but it's just a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. This was so good and went a little bit of a different direction than it maybe could because I was like, oh, we're going to talk about when emotions run high, but we talked about like emotions running high and conflict, which I feel like are so relevant to teaching
Yeah.
and life. And because it
Marriage,
always comes up marriage, everything. Yeah.
being a parent,
Being a parent,
being a
being a family member, being a sibling, being a child of an aging parent. Yeah.
yes, it's everything. It's going to the drive-through. I mean, it's all of it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It is going through the drive through sometimes, especially when they get your order wrong.
Dang.
Oh, the worst is when you order food and have it delivered and the
Yes.
order is wrong. And you're
Oh,
calling the restaurant and you're like, "I got it delivered, so I need a refund," or whatever, you know?
yeah.
Oh, man. But trying to keep it cool, like we can do it, you guys. We can manage these emotions, whether it's about drive-through or something way more
I
serious.
mean, that works with the kid on the other end of the
Yeah.
phone with the drive-through. You can just be like, "Hi, I'm just a person who's a consumer with getting food, and the food wasn't the right
We're
food."
we're just, like, gonna make it Notting Hill. I'm just this.
My gosh, I love it so hard. Oh, Kelsey, this was great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast and for this really important topic because, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, emotions run high. I like that separation too. It doesn't always need to lead to conflict. But I come from this Midwestern space that was like, uh-oh, high emotions mean conflict, even for myself. Like, I have to do something right now to get rid of emotion. I can't be feeling these hot, hot, hot feelings.
The thing I was gonna say actually that kind of popped up as we were reflecting on this recording and you were saying high emotions means conflict. And it kinda got me thinking because sometimes I get high emotions and I have not said a word to anyone, but then it's
Mhm,
conflict internally, right? Because sometimes
mhm,
we have that conflict with
mhm.
ourselves. In a way, you could say that if we have high emotions, there's conflict of some type. Either like it's something's not the way we want it to be, so we have that internal conflict, or we're just like fighting against ourselves or someone else. So either way, we need to move through it and utilize these tools and strategies
I
that we
love
talked
it.
about today.
I love it. I think that's true. Yeah. Well, thank you,
It's
Kelsey. This is
amazing.
awesome. So good.
Chrissy, it's always such a pleasure to have you on. Everybody, be sure to stay tuned on
Yeah.
because I'm sure we'll have Chrissy on again. If you haven't listened, if you liked this episode and you haven't listened to our previous interviews
It's
together,
crazy.
be sure
It's
to
a
do
party.
that. Also, if you're in the Educate and Rejuvenate Club, watch her replays, come to her coaching. She's fabulous. But also she does her own thing too, and she's kind of pivoting and
Yes.
making some fun
Yeah,
changes.
yeah.
So do you want to share kind of some updates of
Yeah,
like what how your
absolutely.
work
I
has
think
been
I just
shifting?
even mentioned here that I love, of course, my educators, just coaching in the mindfulness space about all things. But I really started to realize that people were coming to me more and more about how to get their stuff done. And it was not only from the educator space, but also from the student space. And that really filled my cup. I realized, like, oh,
Mhm.
these 17, 18, you know, 14, 13-year-olds who are like, I just really need to get my Canvas done and my Blackboard and my Google stuff done and my assignments. And I don't know how to
Mhm.
plan and I don't really know what to do. That is my jam now. And also, I'm working with a really amazing young man who's a programmer. He lives in actually our state, but he's also writing a book. So he's got this amazing IT, incredible tech job in Silicon Slope. And then he's also got this amazing creative project that we're just getting done for him. So I think the really secret sauce of my work now in coaching is it's still coaching. It always has been. Nothing's changed, but helping
Mhm.
people really accomplish anything they want with the thoughts, the feelings that drive the actions. So it's not just systems in place of how to do things, but also how do we feel and think
Mhm.
about what we want to get done.
So you're not working
Yes.
against yourself, right? Because yeah, I love it so, so much. I even mentioned that, like, in the book, like, how, like, you can't set a goal just of actions because then you're working against, like, your previous thoughts and feelings. So the work you're doing is
Thank you.
so, so important.
Thank you.
Love it. So make sure to follow Chrissy. Still
Yes,
the
yes.
chrissyconcept.com, yes?
www.thechrissyconcept.com. Come on
Hey,
down. So we create your own concept for how to get anything you want done, anything you want to create, anything you want to do, any side project, business, anything. That's what I do. Yeah.
love it, love it.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
on
you.
this
It's
episode.
been
It's
great.
been such a great time. And for those of you listening, thank you for being here. We love you.
Thanks,
And we'll
everybody.
thank you for joining me on Educate and Rejuvenate the podcast today. If you love what you heard in this episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're hungry for even more, be sure to check out the book that I wrote. It's called Educate and Rejuvenate, a 3-step guide to revitalize your teaching, renew your spirit, and reignite your passion for life. It takes everything you learn here on the podcast and that I teach our members inside the Educate and Rejuvenate Club into a guidebook you can refer to again and again. One of our early readers said it was like clarity for her brain. Plus, it's not only a book. With your purchase, you'll get a full PDF guide with exercises and links to videos and more so that you can not only consume but apply everything that you learn. If you're ready to make Educate and Rejuvenate not just a podcast you passively listen to, but a lifestyle that you put into action, it's time to grab your copy on Amazon today. Or head to educateandrejuvenate.com/book to read the first chapter and the introduction today.